the meeting as efficient and effective as we can so we can get out in the sun before it disappears. So it's the meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee today, Wednesday, the 5th of March. If we can start with the first agenda item, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apology from Councillor Mike White.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, disclosures of interest, please. Any disclosures? No, not seeing any hands up on the screen. Thank you. If we can turn to the minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of January, page by page for accuracy, please, before we approve them. Page 1. Yeah.
Just bring. I accept my apologies for that meeting, but they're not on the minutes. Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. If everyone's happy that that's a reflection of the meeting of January, can I have some hands up, please? Thank you. Thank you, those on screen as well. Okay, Jeremy?
Yeah. Okay.
If we can move on to agenda item 4, and the next two agenda items are with from our colleagues of Audit Wales, and I understand we've got Gillian and Derwin with us, so I don't know whether Gillian or Derwin are taking us through agenda item 4.
Thank you, Chair. Pound everybody. I'll commence things. So I'm Derwin Owen. I'm the Audit Director within Audit Wales. So the report which you have in front of you this afternoon as a committee is our Audit of Accounts report. It is the report which we produce just before we're ready to sign your draft accounts. So it includes all the key conclusions we are making as we come towards the end of your audit of your accounts. A few comments, if I may, Chair, in relation to the report. First of all, a comment around timetabling. I think we received the draft accounts on the 9th of August, which missed the Welsh Government deadline of the 30th of June. So that is the straightforward factual position. But I think there is an important context here to be talked about. Yes, it missed the deadline. However, it is a significant improvement on the prior year, where the draft accounts were received at the end of October. I'm also assured that for next year, the draft accounts, all things being equal, are likely to be received by the end of June. So that over the last couple of years, the council have worked hard to get themselves back on the account preparation timetable. And I think it's also fair to say that in producing its 23-24 accounts, it's the first time it's done so in accordance with the new ledger. So I think that's not an insignificant challenge for any council in implementing a new ledger and producing its accounts. So whilst there is that initial comment around not meeting the deadline, I think there's important context for the committee to reflect on and hopefully get assurance around the timetable for next year. In terms of the key conclusion, it is that we are proposing that we provide an unqualified audit opinion on the accounts. That is an opinion that, in our view, the accounts do show a true and fair view of the balances of the council and of its income and expenditure during the year. And that is a great outcome. Swansea Council is a large, complex organisation, and its accounts reflect that. They are large, complex accounts, but in our view, the accounts do show a true and fair view. I will just remind members that all auditors use the concept of materiality. We couldn't possibly do work to suggest your accounts are precisely accurate, and in accordance with that industry standard, we've calculated materiality as being 1% of your general revenue expenditure, and it comes out just under £12 million, and that's shown in the report. There's just one unadjusted misstatement to bring to your attention. The team in the council have been happy to amend the vast majority of matters which we've brought to their attention. There's just one which is unadjusted, and that's on page 10 of the report and page 18 of the pack. And it relates to the group balance sheet. So the council has an investment in the National Waterfront Museum. And back in March 2021, that was valued under a depreciated replacement cost basis of just over about £8.6 million. However, that hasn't been looked at since as a valuation. So there's some doubt as to whether or not that is the carrying value and the current value are an approximation to each other. The council have, to be fair, done some work looking at relevant indices to get a good indication of to what extent that value might be out by. And I think the indication is that the valuation might be out by about £1.6 million. So we record it here as an uncorrected misstatement. And we'll ask the council to formally respond in relation to that unadjusted misstatement. However, I think it's fair to say that at that level, it doesn't cause me a concern in relation to the opinion. But I am required to bring it to your attention and seek a response on that one. Appendix 3 of the report sets out the other misstatements which the council have amended during the year. I don't think there's anything particularly in there, Chair, which I need to draw the committee's attention to. The committee themselves will note that there are a few amendments which come in the same domain, which are around officers' remuneration and disclosures of pay and that sort of stuff. Now, the council has a lengthy, relatively complex note. And like many other councils, we do tend to find issues in that area. So again, I suppose the general message to Swansea Council and other councils across Wales that that is a note which maybe a little bit additional attention could be provided to. But on the whole, I think Appendix 3 very much suggests a good set of accounts, well supported, and we've been able to make good time working our way through the audit. And other than to say a thank you to Ben and his team for the way in which they've continued to work with us, I will leave it there and hand back to yourself, Chair.
Thank you, Derwin, and thank you for your comments regarding the improvements year on year, and also recognition that there was a new ledger being implemented at that same time. And that's a really good, successful outcome with an unqualified opinion. I note your comments regarding the group balance sheet adjustment, and I'm confident that Ben will have that sorted and in hand. And Ben, do you want to come in to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for inviting me in. I'll probably comment on a couple of bits, and that will also probably address the bulk of the stuff on my item in due course on the statement of accounts. Likewise, I'd like to thank Gillian, Leanne, and Derwin for their working with me and tolerating me. We remain appropriately respectful of each other's views. Sometimes they are brusque and robust, but we remain personally and professionally on the best of terms as one can be with regulators. They are our regulators at the end of the day. And I think Derwin's summation was perfectly fair and reasonable. On the bald facts of it, we were late. I'm pleased he acknowledged Fusion. I'm going to say the same on the statement of accounts. Some councils have been brought to their knees bringing in the product. And I've also mentioned to committee that, we are late. We missed the boat. It was quite clear. You've got to wait for the steamship to come round. And that's part of the reason for not doing the major adjustments, the 1.8 million. So we're so near to doing next year's. We accept it was wrong. We'll reprice it. We'll put it in. It's in hand. I think Derwin is also quite right. I'm a little bit peeved at the sheer number of tidy-ups on the payroll reporting data, and it will be a matter that I will be reflecting in my contribution to the next annual governance statement, which will be in the next set of accounts. The sheer proximity to being a couple of weeks away from starting the following year's accounts albeit we've really technically already started, just meant it was worth just rolling it over, accepting that we will price it appropriately. The point is, recognise it's a bit abstract, isn't it? The theoretical carrying value is something that no one ever intends to dispose of. Just proves you can't just add two sets of books together and strip out the double counting bits to get them to a consolidated position. You can have the bizarre position where they're valued on two completely different bases. But I think everything Devon has said and is absolutely fair and reasonable. And I just also, again, it's England rather than Wales. We're one of the later ones. Wales is in a better place than England, but it was only yesterday 53 local authorities were censured for not even having done their 22-23 accounts, let alone the 23-24. And we are talking about stuff that's nearly a year old, and we're about to start again. The important for me is, yes, we should do it on time. The law is a bit of an arse. There's a clue in the title, in terms of that hardly anyone in the UK managed. I think 1% of bodies met the original deadline. But getting an indicative clean opinion, closing off before the start of the formal closure of next year, the following years, is important because it gives us a steady base. And yes, I have committed, God willing, to everything else and everyone working and every system working to delivering to the 30th of June, because if I don't hit the steamship departing on that point, I will be in exactly the same position. And it does put an enormous undue burden on my staff, who are all working at the same time on other congested matters. Today is the procedurals for tomorrow's budget setting, and I am somewhat occupied in mission control on quite a few other things, but it's of my own making. But Joan has been very fair and balanced in his assessment, and I think you should take suitable comfort from that. By talking here, I will be very brief on the statement of accounts, I assure you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Any questions from members? Paxton? Any questions from members remote? No? Okay, then we'll, just to express our appreciation and congratulations to Ben for getting to this point in time, and also for working so well with colleagues from Audit Wales. It is quite a stressful time for both parties, I'm sure, but to have this actual outcome is a positive one to step forward to start in the next round, as you quite rightly say, Ben. So thank you so much for that, and thank you, Derwin, for the positive comments as well. If we can move on then to the next agenda item, which is the work programme. Is it you or Gillian, Derwin?
I'll take that, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah.
This is just our usual work programme, which we send to you every quarter, which just gives you an overview of our work and also that of Estyn and Care Inspectorate Wales. This programme is as at 31st of December 24. So it is as a point in time. There are just a couple of areas on our performance audit work that I'd just like to update you on. The thematic review on unscheduled care. This has now been issued for clearance to the Regional Partnership Board in the week of the 24th of February, and the Regional Partnership Board will coordinate responses from the council within the health board area. And there's also the thematic review on commissioning. So we've completed the evidence gathering in the earlier part of this year, and the team is now preparing the report findings. And on cyber security, we've completed the evidence gathering again earlier in the year, and the report findings are now being prepared. Then the last thing to update you on is on the local government national studies on capital planning in local government. Earlier this year, interviews were confirmed for Swansea Council as part of the national study. That's all I really wanted to update you on, but if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Gillian. I mean, the report speaks for itself. I've got no queries. Any queries from you, Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. Thanks for the report. Just going back to the unscheduled care, I know I've brought this up before. On page 35, the actual thematic review on unscheduled care. Does the actual you mentioned it gone to the regional partnership, I think, in last month. When we get the report, will it be specific to the health board area, or will it be specific to the council area? Please, thanks.
I'm not entirely sure of the specifics. It's not my area of expertise, but I can come back to you on that. I think it's specific to the health board area, but I can certainly find out and come back to you on that.
Okay, thanks very much. And then just on page 44, there's the national themes on unscheduled care, and it mentions a publication date of this spring. I assume the national one will come out again as per these health board area reports. Thank you.
National reports are generally sort of a summarisation of all of the sort of local reports. So again, that's not my area of expertise, so I'll have to come back to you on that one again. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thanks very much. But just a bit of clarity of what to expect maybe in the next 2 or 3 months. That's great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll find out and
Thanks,
get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Any questions? Julie?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure the committee appreciates you including Estyn and Care Inspectorate Wales in your audit work programme for us to see. But I do note that Newport and Pembrokeshire, they feature quite heavily. They've been selected for review by yourselves and by Estyn and Care Inspectorate Wales, all being in a variety of areas. Do you have any mechanism for engaging with the other organisations, obviously without impairing your independence, to review your individual work plans and avoid any potential clashes? Thank you.
Thanks. I'll pick that one, Julie. Gillian, if that's okay. Yeah, no, I think we do work closely with Estyn and Care Inspectorate. Clearly, we all three of us have our own professional responsibilities to discharge, but we seek the best we can to ensure that our programs of activity dovetail into each other where at all possible. Now, we work on different timeframes on some of our reviews to Estyn and Care Inspectorate because they are more unannounced. You know, you're given the 6-week and whatever it is, whereas Audit Wales takes a slightly less rigid approach to it and provides a bit more notice and tries to accommodate. And quite often you'll see when Gareth comes and talks about our programme that Audit Wales has moved a review of X or Y to allow it to accommodate Estyn or CIW coming in to do something. So we do our utmost to seek to not to overburden any one council with a volume of reviews at the same time, and worse still, a volume of reviews covering the same topics at the same time. It doesn't always work perfectly. I'll hold my hands up to that, but we do our best in terms of our regular liaison, and the Auditor General is part of a Chief Inspectorate forum and all the rest of it to seek to get the line of best fit whilst allowing all three of us to discharge our responsibilities.
Thank you for that.
Julie, any other queries? No? Thank you again, Julian and Darren, for that report, and we note the contents of both papers. If we can move on now then to agenda item 6, which is the statement of accounts. And if I can just remind members that we have received these in the first iteration, I think back in September, Ben, if I remember rightly.
That's correct, yeah.
So a number of queries that were raised then, I don't wish to raise again on this occasion, because I've looked through the papers, sad as I am, and I look back at the September and the same queries I was going to raise, I raised then. So if you can take us through those papers, Ben, in whichever way you feel
Yes,
appropriate.
thank you, Chair. As I alluded to, I will be brief, and thank you for that preamble, because I think that's the important part. Whether you agree or disagree with my professional view and the views of the auditors, we note your comments. We noted them in September. The word draft is still on there. In recent years, we normally don't put the word draft on. Technically, in one sense, they're still draft until they're adopted by council in a couple of weeks' time and until the completion certificate is issued by the Auditor General. But these are as near final as you can get to. We have amended for anything that our auditors required us to change for, and as Derwin and others have pointed out, where we've decided not to, but on the promise of we'll sort it out because it's so close to doing the next year's version. Any attempt to redo the stuff would result in it being sent back to Audit Wales for further checking. Tread carefully. I'm not allowed to fetter committee's right to ask me questions. You asked me a lot of questions at the time. I answered a number of them. I answered some in follow-up, and I've also answered some in the meantime. So the reality is this is the set that has been subject to audit, and the changes that were needed and have been appropriately made in my professional view and our auditor's view, and that is why we're at the point of being ready to take them forward. I will of course take questions, but I just add that caveat to it. We only change stuff where we have to change it. We don't just change it for fun, and the danger is if you do it too late towards the end in what is a very congested time space. That's of my making. Tomorrow is council budget. There are legal deadlines to meet, and there's quite a tight turnaround time. And if I change anything, if I change a comma or a full stop, back it goes to Audit Wales for checking. So I'm hoping that members will take it in that stead. And a reminder, Julie, I promise that next year's will be the one that's in the RNIB correct colours. I said for completeness, I just keep them in the same format. It was a very well made point, and we already have a colour scheme. So again, if you're wondering why that, because members might not quite remember exactly what I promised to do when, as it were, but the amendments are as set out based on the Audit Wales report, and we've amended where we've needed to amend, and I deliberately spoke at some length on that to avoid needing to take you through page by page by page. As Damon has said, these are large, complicated accounts. They are nearly a year old already, and some of the amendments that I've referred to are, if the books are open for a year, some of the things that are subject to a subjective valuation may have indeed moved again, and you just get to a point where it is draw a line, close them, get a completion certificate, rinse, repeat, start again is my professional advice. But I stand to be corrected, and certainly would not want members to not feel they could ask questions. If there's a showstopper that they've spotted something that is so fundamental that would cause me or the auditors concern for tens of millions, of course you must raise them. Others, I may politely, respectfully be saying, I'll take them into account in the draft version I'm going to be starting on in 2 weeks' time. I don't propose otherwise to go through them again, Chair, because as you rightly said, we went through them in quite some depth in September. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bearing those comments in mind, what Ben has made, do we have any questions that we feel are urgently needing looking at? David?
It wasn't a question, it was just an acknowledgement. I'd obviously brought something up about on page 162 in regard to the table on there, but it was just to acknowledge the response I've had. Just for an acknowledgement, really. Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, David. And again, if I may, that's an example of where it was a perfectly reasonable thing to ask on follow-up. It wasn't asked the first time. Perfectly right and reasonable, perfectly logical as to the reason why. You wouldn't have known other if you hadn't asked it. So those back channels are still working and they're appropriate. So it's helpful, David, for you to have raised it. And my thanks for acknowledging that I've sorted it and given you an answer on that. It's cosmetics with an explanation as to why things were what they were. Nothing for you to worry about, Audit Wales. Promise if there was, I'd tell you. I'll see you, David, later anyway. But it was just around definitions of a particular item as to what was included or not included, and then a full answer has been given. So thank you, David.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Gordon?
There's just clarification you can for me, Ben. On page 136, the fair value of defined benefit pension scheme, there are unrecognised assets of 248 million. Can you just tell me what are unrecognised assets?
I'm struggling to get to the right page, but the defined benefits pension scheme is a mystery to us all and based on actuarial valuation at a snapshot in time and measures future uncrystallised assets and liabilities and is subject to an accounting adjustment to reflect them in the books. It's as simple as that. It's a nominal estimate based on actuarial advice, and I'm obliged to disclose them appropriately. It recognises that not all of the assets are turnable into cash at any point in time and attempts to discount both the future assets and income streams and the liabilities. If you need more than that, you'll have to bear with me while I try and get to the right page. But that's what it's about. And it's one of those oddities where there is again a legislative override that ends up with us having to put stuff into the funny money elements of the accounts with negative pension reserves and things like that. And even when the pension fund is in surplus on an actuarial basis, it may not quite technically be on an accounting basis and vice versa, just to help blow people's minds. And for a reminder, this is a gross £1 billion organisation with a £3 billion pension fund attached, and it's right that the summation of the pension fund accounts are in here. They've already been subject to audit, the audit completion certificate done and dusted and issued. So I don't think there's anything to particularly worry about.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, if there are no further questions on that, Julie? You're on mute, Julie.
Oh, thank you very much. My question is forward-looking and it spans both the statement of accounts and agenda item 10. So I'll reserve my question until we get to agenda item 10, okay? Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Julie. Okay then.
Can I just check though, Chair? Apologies. Is agenda item 10 to do with budget monitoring or anything like that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Those are for information only, and officers are not
information
intended to
only, so
answer
any-
questions. So I think if it would be more advisable for you to probably ask your question now in the item that's under debate. Apologies for intervening, Chair, but I didn't want Julie to be prevented from asking a question, given we've agreed we'll try and avoid answering questions in Part B, if that's okay.
in Part B, we will be, if there are any questions, we'll be asking Jeremy to take them away and include them in the tracker, because we don't expect any officers to answer the questions in section B. And I was going to mention that at the beginning of agenda item 10. So do you want to
Okay.
ask the question now, or do you want to
Yes.
wait and...
No, I'll ask the question now if that's okay. And apologies for my confusion. In the narrative report, Ben, you expressed concern about the financial outlook for the authority, and we've heard Audit Wales expressing concerns in previous meetings about the level of financial savings that's been delivered either through transformation or efficiency savings. And it is also a theme that's noted in your report at agenda item 10 in respect of 24-25 budget monitoring. The narrative report states that the authority continues to have ambitious plans to invest substantially in its capital infrastructure, a significant part of which will need to be financed from its own revenue resources. Can I ask you, in relation to the revenue reserves earmarked to fund future capital expenditure, can you outline what controls are in place to minimise the risk that the authority overcommits itself to capital expenditure projects going forward?
So I'll be as brief as I can, given an awful lot of this will also be considered at Council tomorrow in the medium-term financial plan, the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, the capital programme and all of the other items on the agenda. You're right, I continue to flag up my concerns. We are overspending as an authority, as been reported throughout. There is a common theme across all authorities that, notwithstanding that the settlement is more than we might have expected earlier in the year, there are pressures that far exceed them. So you're going to get 22 treasurers in Wales that are all going to say they look forward and they're always gravely concerned. In terms of the specific on the last one, which is set out more distinctly in the papers to Council tomorrow, two aspects to that. It should come as no surprise to elected members that this authority's position has been very, very straightforward. We borrowed 210 million at 1 and 2% to fund the entire future medium-term financial plan a few years ago. It's moved on. There is a borrowing requirement. I've given clear, consistent advice on that will have to be externalised at a future point. We, like most of the authorities, are waiting for interest rates to drop because I ain't borrowing from the PWLB at 6% today. I am fortunately the second richest in earmarked reserves by authority in Wales. We are a big authority, so we're not necessarily that in per capita. And you are right, Julie, we do have an earmarked capital equalisation reserve which looks to smooth items of capital financing. And the bottom line is the only person who can touch the capital equalisation reserve in year and form a view on any adds to the capital programme is me in the Constitution, because it says so. The only time at which the authority can choose to do otherwise is when Council sets the budget, and the budget is set tomorrow. And I'm not shy or a shrinking violet. There will be reference in my reports tomorrow, and I will say it on the record. I have issued 2 modifications in respect to my Section 25 assurance. They are not material to the overall council. If they were, it might be much sterner words. But in terms of controlling it, the only person who can determine the adequacy of them is me. But I have drawn attention in the papers to council tomorrow, and they are legally obliged to consider and weigh my advice, that there is some use of the reserves for smoothing pressures, not just for capital financing. That will be played out tomorrow anyway, and I'm sure it can be done in more justice tomorrow. It will be a theme of debate, so I don't mind pre-discussing it, as it were. And I'm glad I did intervene, because I would have not wanted you to have been prevented from asking a relevant question about old and new, because they all do flow into each other. The pressures are real on the public sector, on local government. And of course, all of this is taken in a time and point when I don't know. It's only just gone through the Senate yesterday or the day before in terms of the Welsh Government's budget. I await the 26th of March new fiscal event, or is it budget? I'm not sure. And I await the end of June spending review and to see what services are prioritised or not prioritised. I have not allowed for some significant increases in central government support in the medium-term financial plan, and will be giving appropriate advice accordingly to council tomorrow. But the bottom line is I've just given messages saying it'll all change come anyway because there's a spending review coming out. But I hope that helps both answer the generalities and the specifics, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And I think as a Governance and Audit Committee, we need to note the comments that Ben have made, particularly with, you know, the way he's managing the situation around the financial agenda. So thank you for that, Ben. If we can move on then to agenda item 7, which is the Internal Audit Monitoring Report for Q3. Is it you, Simon, or is it Nick?
Yes, Chair, I'll take that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. This is the Internal Audit Q3 Monitoring Report. It outlines the work undertaken by the team between October and December 2024. As shown in 2.1, a total of 14 audits were finalised in the quarter. 7 had a high assurance rating and 7 had a substantial assurance rating. So no moderate and no limited audit reports were issued in the quarter. 2.3 illustrates that 85 audit recommendations were made and 100% of those recommendations were accepted by client departments. And there's a breakdown of those recommendations in table 2.4. In terms of progress against the plan, as shown in 2.7, as at the 31st of December, 48% of the plan was completed to at least draft report stage, and an additional 27% of the plan was in progress. Therefore, 75% of the plan was complete or in progress at the end of December. And again, no moderate or limited reports were issued in the quarter. In terms of follow-ups, no moderate reports were followed up in the quarter, as noted in 4.3. However, the standard follow-up information on the high and substantial assurance reports is illustrated in section 5. That shows in the table only one low-risk recommendation hadn't been completed at the time, and that wasn't actually due for implementation until June and July this year, so it wasn't due for completion yet anyway. Generally, Chair, there's nothing else to draw members' attention to. The appendices list the audits completed and the scope of those reviews, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any questions on this report from members? Julie?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon, for your report. You say that approximately 75% of audit activities were completed as at the end of Q3, and given your staff shortages, I'd like to congratulate the team for achieving as much. But could you explain what the anticipated impact of those staff shortages will be on your year-end opinion and the Section 151 officer opinion?
Yeah, just to clarify a point there, Julie, the paragraph in 2.7 shows that 48% of the plan was completed to at least draft report stage, and an additional 27% was in progress. So in terms of completion, we're at a 48% basically in terms of at least draft report stage. Things have picked up this quarter, Julie. Obviously, the staff had to have an induction and training in that quarter as well, because we did recruit 3 members of staff. I'm optimistic that we'll pick up completion rates in this quarter to the end of March, and I'm fairly confident to get at least 70-75% of the plan complete by the end of the year. So that will inform the opinion. And in my professional opinion, that will be enough to form a judgment on the internal controls and the risk management arrangements of the council. So at this point, I don't really want to draw any attention to the risk in that area at this point, Julie, because I'm hoping over the next couple of weeks we will pick up. We have picked up already this quarter, and I'm fairly confident we will do so by the end of March.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, if I may, I note that a computer audit was performed on file controls. Could you tell the committee whether any of the staff that you have in post now are computer auditors, or whether everybody is trained to a sort of general standard in terms of computer audit?
Yeah, it's definitely the latter, Julie. If the committee recalls, this was one of the points that was raised as part of our external peer review the last time, where we don't actually have a dedicated technical computer auditor in the team. That isn't unique to Swansea. I think it's quite generic across a lot of the local authorities where there is a shortage in auditors generally, especially where they're specialists in terms of IT. There was an intention to procure a dedicated IT audit for this year and possibly next year. But given that Audit Wales are currently doing a cybersecurity audit, that has been postponed, because obviously that will give us some assurance over the controls in that area from Audit Wales. In terms of the team, we are trying to upskill them, so they are spending some time with the IT staff to increase their knowledge and understanding of IT audit. Basically, we do have audit programs in place to guide them, but again, we are trying to get new staff familiarised with IT, obviously increase their skill set in that area. Julie, if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Anyone else online first? No, David?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Hi, Simon. Julie got ahead of me really by asking about staffings. That's my usual question, but that's fine. Just in regard to paragraph 3.2, you mentioned about the annual consultation with heads of service. Can you just let us know what sort of format that takes? Is it face-to-face or is it a desktop? What's the format, please? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Obviously, this might be more relevant to the next agenda item, but I'm happy to discuss it here anyway, because it applies to both reports. Every year around about November, December time, I get in touch with every head of service in the council and send them a list of all of the orders that we have listed for their areas on the Audit Universe, which is a general list of all the orders we have listed across the council. So I send out a list to every head of service around about November time, ask them to check that list and provide any updates on areas that have changed in the last 12 months, any restructures, any new legislation, any new audit areas that they want us to consider adding to the programme. I also ask them to outline how they feel we can add value over the next 12 months and ask them for any advice they would like our intervention over the next 12 months to consider doing another piece of work. I also ask them to highlight any possible risks that they consider, any changes in legislation, any changes in guidance that we need to be made aware of at that point. So it's initially a paper-based exercise, but then my senior auditors then meet individually with the heads of service face-to-face to go through the outcomes, and then I update my Audit Universe listing from that resulting document then, David.
Thanks, Simon. That's fine. Thank you. The other one was on page 260 and 261. It's a similar theme, really. When you mention in the housing and public health one and the digital and customer services that the assurance level is substantial, but when we look at the end column, there's still obviously some, in the key findings, there's obviously some issues there in areas of concern. So I just wonder how that marries up to the substantial assurance rating. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Often in those audit areas, as you see in the scope documents in that table, it's normally a fairly broad scope of that review. So if the majority of the areas have tested satisfactorily, in terms of the overall assurance, I'm happy to give a substantial assurance rating. If 90% of the areas are okay, and there's only one low risk recommendation or medium risk recommendation, then our sort of gauge in terms of the overall report opinion would dictate that would be a substantial assurance report. So it depends really. If there are a lot of areas with lots of issues, then obviously it would be a limited or moderate report, or a lower rated report. But if there's only one or two areas, which I find are probably either low risk or medium risk, I'm tempted to give a substantial assurance rating if it's not that high risk.
Okay, thanks for that. Just on the ratings then, the substantial, etc. Is that a national model of rating that you use? Just to clarify, thanks.
It is unique to the local authority, but we do compare our ratings across Wales as part of the Welsh Chief Auditors Group, so they are consistent with other local authorities in terms of how we rate our report in terms of the number of recommendations and the rating of those recommendations as well in terms of high, medium or low risk. So we are similar to all other local authorities in Wales, David.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Thanks for the responses. Thank you.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. On page 260, more point of clarification. The point against legal democratic services, just the last bit in the last column that says it's recommended that regular reminders are sent to councillors. I think you might need to relook at that slightly, because I mean we do already get that. So it strikes me it's not necessarily we're not getting the reminders, it's we're not necessarily picking up on them for whatever reason. I'm not saying anything. So maybe another thought needs to be given to how to improve that, because I don't think reminders are quite they're not the answer, but they're only part of it, and maybe something else needs to be looked at.
Yeah, thanks for that point, Leslie. Obviously, I'll take that back to Democratic Services to Hugh to see if he's got any other suggestions on how we can strengthen that. But yeah, I'm happy to take that back and see what Hugh suggests.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Any other questions from members? I've got a couple. Simon, comes back one of them to the comments Julie's raised about the expertise you have in the team for computer audit. Because you've undertaken a number of areas where there's computer related activities, and some of those concern me to a degree, and I just wonder what the associated risks are around those. So rather than going into the detail at this meeting, I'd like to pick those up with you outside of the meeting, if that's okay, and then I can feed back at the next meeting. But it's about your ability to conform with the standards without that expertise in ICT, and with the ongoing, the rapid development of IT skills now, I think that's a risk for the council if we've not got appropriate ICT skills, and if you're reliant on the ICT team to try and enhance those skills within your audit team. So I think that's something I'd like to pick up with you outside that meeting.
That's
and
fine,
maybe
Chair.
it would be helpful for Ness to be included in that at the regular one-to-ones that Ness and I have, if that's okay. Because
fine.
I am
That's fine.
concerned. I am concerned with that.
That's fine, Chair. I'm happy to take that back and obviously meet with yourself and Ness. One thing I will add to give some assurance to the committee is that we do have audit programs in place for those IT audits already. So it's not like the audit is going in blind. We do have tests matrices already set up from previous reviews. Obviously, those might be out of date and it may need updating from one year to the next or when it was last audited. They do have a framework in place based on SIPFA matrices to follow out those audits. But yeah, I'm happy to take that away and discuss it with you and Nest in due course, Chair.
Yeah, I'd like to progress with that one. And also in Appendix 3, you've got no longer required audits there. I'm just wondering who's made those decisions that they're no longer required and whether that's been through the CMT for approval.
Yeah, just so I put those in on purpose there with a note next to them. Obviously, there was originally an audit on the plan for the new risk management system and the policy review. I believe we've had discussions with Nest that Audit Wales are currently doing an audit of risk management. So it was agreed with yourself and Nest that audit should be taken out of this year's plan. Obviously, it was just duplication of a review that Audit Wales are currently underway and currently doing. The last two, supporting people, team and partnerships, those two have come out of the consultation exercise, basically. Changes within the department have seen a restructure, and in discussions with the head of service there, our audits that would cover those areas would just be on salaries, which is low risk, basically. And what we've done, we've included a different audit covering the risk areas for those areas in 25-26 draft plan, which covers commissioning, contracting and monitoring, as noted in the table. So again, the justification is there for clarification and for transparency, Chair, but the first one has obviously been agreed with Ness and the second two have come out of the consultation exercise.
Okay, thank you, Simon. If there are no further questions, then can we move on to agenda item 8, which is your internal audit plan methodology?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Okay, now just get the page. Okay, so this report provides the committee with some background outlining how the annual work plan is put together. But prior to going into the detail of that, Chair, I'd like to give the committee some background to some changes that are due to come into effect on the 1st of April, applicable from 25-26 onwards. So as outlined in 1.2, members will be aware that the current standards we comply with are the public sector internal audit standards. You've probably heard me say that hundreds of times, so you should all be familiar with that terminology. I complete an annual assessment of compliance, and I report the findings of that in my internal audit annual report. Those standards also form the basis of our last two external assessments. So the last two reviews by Cardiff and Blaenau Gwent were both based on our compliance with those standards. The standards as they are in place until the 31st of March, and these are then going to be replaced with new global internal audit standards issued by the Institute of Internal Auditors, as noted in 1.4. So basically, the standards that we are working against, are changing from the 1st of April. So some background on the global internal audit standards, as shown in 2.4. The new standards consist of the IIA, Institute of Internal Auditors, global standards, plus an application note that's been issued by SIPFA, which outlines how those standards should be applied in the UK public sector. A brief outline of the contents of the new standards is shown in 2.6. And then obviously the application note, as noted in 3.1. The application note from SIPFA provides a framework for the implementation of the global standards in a public sector. So it's interpreting the wider corporate standards to a local setting in local government and public sector. A summary of the application note can be found in 3.3. Just to give committee assurance, I'm currently in the process of assessing our compliance with the global standards and the application note with a Section 1.1 officer and CMT. In order to take any required actions to strengthen compliance through 25-26. Further assurance, there's nothing majorly different from the existing public sector standards. There are some variations, but they are broadly very similar. So initial sort of evaluation indicates that we are broadly compliant with the majority of the points in the standards and the application as it stands. But obviously, I'm going into the detail of that to confirm compliance and to strengthen that if needs be. In addition to that, obviously, because of the new standards, the audit charter has also had to be updated to reflect the new requirements, as noted in 3.5. The updated charter is due to come to the committee in April for review in draft format. It's been to CMT for their review and agreement, so it'll then come to committee for their final sign-off. And you will see some rather obvious changes to that document. In addition to those two new documents and standards, we also have a new code of governance of internal audit in local government, as outlined in section 4. This links with the standards, and the standards dictate that local government should apply this code to ensure compliance with the standards. Again, I'm currently working with CMT to assess our existing compliance with the code, and I've already issued a table of recommendations to further strengthen our compliance to CMT, which was accepted this week. So just to make you aware that that is being progressed and developed. One typing error I wanted to highlight, sorry, in 4.6. I've noted that there was a copy of the code in Appendix 2, and that was before I put the link into the document to save paper and to save the agenda pack size. So that does not apply. So I should have deleted that, Chair, before it was published. So that is the background, basically, to what's happening from the 1st of April. And obviously that does then impact on the audit plan. However, the new global standards still require us to put a risk-based plan together. So technically, nothing really has changed that drastically in terms of our compilation of the plan. So the plan itself must be discussed with the corporate management team and then approved by this committee. So this report provides a brief outline of how the plan is compiled. As noted in 6.3, a number of sources of information are reviewed when compiling the plan. We look at the risk registers, any areas of concern from corporate management team, heads of service, or this committee. We also compile an assurance map, outlining the risks and the controls in place already. We also consider any recent changes to the council's systems or operations, and also consider internal audit's cumulative knowledge of the organisation as well. We also review corporate complaints reports to see if anything strikes us that's needing a review, if there are any patterns or any patterns emerging from different complaint areas. I also review the corporate performance reports to see if there's anything in those that might indicate audit is required. And also then, in order to prevent duplication, we look at the scrutiny work plan and the Audit Wales work programme, which I'm due to work with Gareth on in due course to check next year's plan with them. In terms of the audits themselves on the audit list, Audit Universe, every audit has a risk assessment and is given a score based on the items in 6.5, and that dictates how frequently they should be audited across the council from 1 year to 5 years. So from high risk, it will be every year, or low risk, every 5 years, possibly 6, if there's little to look at. Committee will be aware that we have fundamental audits, as noted in 6.7. Those are considered to be core systems, and those are done either every year or every 2 years. They are reported separately to the committee in terms of the recommendation tracker. As I mentioned to David's question, we undertake a consultation exercise, as noted in 6.10, and this gives the heads of service and corporate management team the opportunity to comment on the coverage in their areas and highlight any risks or changes on different legislation that we need to be made aware of. It's part of the horizon scanning from their point of view to see if there's anything they want to flag up as a change that needs to be considered for the plan for the next financial year. The consultation exercise was completed in December, and that's been considered as part of the draft plan being compiled now. As noted in 6.14, the draft plan is currently being compiled, but it's expected to follow the same structure as previous plans. So there will be cross-cutting audit reviews, fundamental reviews, and then also service-specific audits, which are more detailed service area audits. Again, as I noted, historically, we look at the risk registers, and again, that was being completed for this year's plan to inform any risk areas that are not already captured as part of the Audit Universe. And obviously, then we compiled an assurance map as well, as noted in Appendix 3 of the report. In terms of staff resourcing, I'm happy to say that we've got a full complement this year. So I'm hoping that would be the case going forward for 25-26, and that's made up of 9.1 full-time equivalents, so that is unchanged from the current year and previous years. So as noted in 6.23, the audit plan must remain flexible, so it may be subject to change if new risks or new issues emerge during the financial year, which we need to consider adding into the plan. And again, any changes will be flagged up with corporate management team and this committee and the chair. The draft plan is due to come to the committee in April, alongside the charter and the strategy document, Chair. So sorry, I'll stop talking there and I'll give you a chance to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you for that, Simon. Obviously, the new standards are essential that they're approved and adopted as they were meant. And one of those requirements would be regarding the skills within the team to undertake those audits to meet the criteria that's specified within the standards. So I think it's appropriate that we as a committee, we look at the skill sets within the team as well to make sure you've got that cross-cutting skill with the drive on changes in IT particularly, because you've obviously got a breadth of knowledge across the council's business and risks, but we need to address that IT skills to comply and to conform with the standards. I agree there's not significant changes between the previous standards and standards coming in, and we've had 12 months to consider these because we've known about them for 12 months in the All Wales chairs groups that I attend. We've had a couple of presentations from SIP for themselves on what they preempted would be the changes, and I think the message was clear. It's not going to cause any undue challenge for chief auditors across the piece. So I'm pleased to receive the paper, and I'm pleased that the committee's having sight into how important it is for you to comply with the standards in undertaking the work that you do. And it may be perhaps at a future training session for members, it would be quite nice for you to give a bit more detail around how you're ensuring that you're conforming with the standards as part of a process. Not that it significantly affects the working of the Governance and Audit Committee, but I think it's useful for them to understand your methodologies around the assurance ratings you've given how you're assessing the risk, and it's just a general enhancement of the knowledge of members. I think that may be helpful if members are happy to consider that for a future planning, future training session.
Can I just second that really, because I think there's obviously the three elements: the standards, the application note, but equally the code of conduct.
Yeah.
And I think it would be helpful, Sam, if possible, in the first quarter of next year, if we could have that training awareness session. I know it's a tough ask to to put that in, but the sooner I think we sort of have a revisit to everything, the better for the committee, really. Thank you.
It's nothing too onerous. I wouldn't be asking for anything too onerous. It's just understanding, because often members will raise a question around the opinion that you give or how you assess in risk. And I think it's a short training session would probably help those questions from arising in future meetings. So rather than us keep asking you a question, how is this substantive? Why is it not? You know? So I think it's trying to avoid those questions coming, because members will understand exactly where your thoughts are when you give the opinions that you give.
Yeah, that's fine. If I could go back on a few points there. I mean, I'm happy to do a training session. We've done that in the past with members on internal audit basics. In terms of the new standards, yes, they were in place in January. They came in January 2024, but a lot of the other documents weren't actually finalised until middle of February 2025. So, for example, the application note was up for consultation for a number of months. It was only finalised the second week of February, so that's fairly new. So we are working as much as we can, as hard as we can, to ensure we are as compliant as possible, as soon as possible. But my view, Chair, is that obviously we can't be 100% fully compliant on the 1st of April. It's going to be a moving object really over the next 12 months. Obviously, we want to get compliant as soon as possible for, just for next year's overall compliance assessment. But it is something that we are working towards. Like I said, I put an action plan in place for CMT already for the code. And working towards a mapping exercise of where we're at in terms of compliance against the standards. But as you say, Chair, there's nothing really dramatically different to what we're already required to do under the public sector standards. So I'm not overly concerned, and I don't think the committee should be. But just to be where I am, currently doing that exercise as we speak to ensure we are compliant as possible.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Thank you for the continued efforts of the team as well in progressing through the audit plan. So thank you for that. We can move on to agenda item 9 then, and it's the corporate risk overview for Q3. Ness?
Thank you, Chair. So this report presents an overview of the status of the strategic risks and issues as at the end of Q3. It is the first time that we are sharing with you in Appendix A the report that's been produced using the new risk management software application InPhase. And section 2 of the cover report explains the risk management process under the new risk management framework and policy. So section 2.1 sets out how the risks and issues are identified and scored. Section 2.2, how they are monitored, in particular with directorate management teams reviewing risk at every monthly meeting. And risk owners being assigned to each of the risks that are identified. And then section 2.3 reflects that all the strategic risks and issues are reported to the corporate management team monthly as well, so that we, as a CMT, can take a view as to the rigour of the process and whether or not any scores need to change or anything needs to be escalated. Section 3 of the report then deals with the status as at the end of Q3, and Appendix A contains that detail. So the risk scores for all the strategic, or the scores for all the strategic risks and issues remained the same during Q3, except in the 4 cases set out there. The education risk issue increased its score, the workforce risk increased its score, the net zero issue decreased its score, and the waste strategy risk also saw a decrease in its score. And those movements reflect changes to external factors which either increased the likelihood or, as I say, decreased the severity of the issue or risk as a consequence of improved arrangements. Section 3.6 of the report explains the new report format for Appendix A. So you will note that there are some gaps in Appendix A, and that's because what we've done is we've, in order to comply with what we said we would do for committee, is that we've used the new application to present the information at Q3, but actually the system is not yet live and was not live as at 31st of December. So some of those empty fields are because they aren't fields that exist in our current risk register, and our new pieces of information which are now being updated in Q4. So you're seeing a report at a point in the development of that new application. So for example, you won't see the target score. That's something which we are now working with risk owners to develop in this Q4. So when you get the Q4 report, you will see that those risks do have a target score, but that's something, as I say, which is still in development. Similarly, there's a gap in the box that says last updated and latest comment, and that reflects the fact that we don't have that in our existing risk register. And so again, that's something which will be present at the end of the Q4 report. The final point I'd make is that there is, apologies, one minor error on the report under the delivery of regeneration, the regeneration programme, where it doesn't have a category, a tolerance linked to the category. It should have a cautious risk category, and that has a tolerance level associated with it. So that's the only final point I would make. To end then with the recommendation, the committee is recommended to note the strategic risks and issues as at the end of Q3, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you, Naz.
I mean, presentation wise, it's a lot more, it's a lot clearer, but recognising that there are some gaps in the document as it stands. But hopefully for Q4 we'll see a fully populated report. But I certainly like the format of this. It's much easier to follow and to understand. But can I open up to comments? Councillor Leslie Walton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a point on the way it's laid out, the actual risk is laid out. I thought in the past we'd agreed that all risks would start with the word if, and then have a preamble, and then to say what we would do about it. Is that not going to be the case?
I think generally that is the principle, and we have in this fourth quarter been working with risk owners to review not only the definition of risks, but also to review the control measures to make it as robust as possible. So that will be picked up at Q4. This reflects, as I say, the position as at the 31st of December as we're transitioning to these new arrangements. And I think we have recognised through the work we've done with the leadership team that some of our definitions and some of our control measures definitely are benefiting from a review and updating. So yes, Councillor Walton, you will expect to see in the Q4 report that every risk will say if, then.
And then just the other thing I noticed on the very first risk on a page, risk level, if I understand it rightly, it's either strategic risk or strategic issue. And in this particular case, it just says strategic. Is that right? Or
yes, so you've got risk on a page and then you've got issues on a page. So at the top of each one, it says whether it's a risk or an issue.
Yeah.
And then we're only showing the committee the strategic risks and issues. There's another layer below of operational risks and issues, and below that of project. So you can assume that whatever comes to committee is either a strategic risk or a strategic issue.
Okay, thanks. That clarifies it. Thank you.
Any other? Jeff?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Ness, I'm actually looking at the delivering the regeneration programme, which you actually mentioned. I can't get my mind around how you're actually going to set the target at the end of the day, because it's, shall we say, an ongoing development anyway. So, what sort of criteria is the target going to be set? And also, if you can clarify the inherent score of 25, how does that relate to the figures you actually got at the bottom there, all the 9s and so on?
So the if we start with the inherent risk, so that is scored using the risk matrix, which isn't included in this report, but in future reports we can put that at the end to help the reader. But that's based on the likelihood, a score given for likelihood and a score given for impact, and you times those two together and you get your inherent score, and that's the score if no remedial or no mitigation actions have been put in place. What is the level of risk to the organisation? So 25 is the highest it can be, and then what we do is we say, well, if we apply certain control measures to mitigate that risk, what happens to the likelihood score and the impact score? And then you recalculate it and say, well, if we do X and Y, then the likelihood is going to come down, and if we do A and B, the impact is going to come down, and then you recalculate it based on that risk matrix, and that gives you your residual score, which is the figure you'll see against the 9 in the case of the regeneration programme. You'll see the residual score there of 9. And then in terms of calculating the target, it's an art, not a science, but it is about taking a view as to the level of risk that we can't get rid of the risk altogether. If we could, it wouldn't be on the register. But what is the level of risk that we're aiming for, which is the minimum that we think is tolerable? And so it is an assessment that each risk owner will be making, taking account of the external factors, the likelihood and impact, and the effect of the control measures that they're putting in place. So as I say, that's a piece of work that's going on at the moment, and it's really all designed to help us take a more dynamic approach to the management of risk, and to give us some guidelines which help to prompt us to say, should this risk be escalated or de-escalated? Do we need to do more to try and mitigate it than we are doing? That's the kind of underlying aim that we're seeking to achieve by introducing tolerance levels and target scores so that we can manage risks more actively.
Okay, thanks very much. Good luck.
Thank you. David?
Thanks, Chair. Just in regards to 2.2 and the management of the risk and issues, regular contact with heads of service, and just to reflect back on the last agenda item about the internal audit annual plan, can I just square the circle there, and that one feeds the other in that sense? So the discussions that take place with heads of service are then reflected into the internal audit plan process?
Yes, so I guess there's a number of aspects to that. So first of all, Simon engages with every head of service in developing the audit plan, but with the knowledge that he has from the risk register and from the assurance map work that he's done, and the discussions that are then held. So there are individual discussions held with heads of service, and then with directors, and then again with corporate management team, with all of that information about the risk universe overlaying that.
Okay, thanks for that, Ness. It was just clarifying those two agenda items, how they link up. Thanks. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, can I just make an observation? On the delivering the regeneration programme, in the left-hand column are the titles. You've got the risk description, risk level, category, risk appetite, responsible officer, cabinet member.
Yeah.
And then over. Not all of them have got the same titles. There are some missing. So, for example, connecting care are missing risk level, category, risk appetite. So I think there's some inconsistency on the left-hand titles. If they can all be,
they will be. As I say, this is a work in progress. But what we wanted to do is fulfil our commitment, which was to bring you a Q3 report using the new framework and the new application. So actually is due to go live during this month, And we're at the moment in the process of ensuring we have the guidance in place to enable risk owners to go on and start using it live.
So those papers will be
and those-
fixed
Exactly.
in future. Okay. And can I just pick up on Connecting Care? It talks about the replacement of the Welsh Government's programme and National Community Care Information System. Do we know what the situation is with that? Because that seems to be quite a big risk area for us.
Yes, the implementation of the new system is underway in terms of with the new supplier. It's a programme that is being very closely managed by us locally, and we're also very engaged. Officers are very engaged in the kind of national arrangements as well. So the position on that risk will be different when you see the end of Q4. So it's an improving picture.
I just wanted to raise it because there was not a lot of information there. And it's quite a risky area. Okay, thank you for that, Ness, and well done for progressing as far as you got eventually. I know it's been a tough journey for you to make, but it's good to see some of the outcomes coming from that. Okay, then if we can move on to section B, which is reports for information. These reports are for our information. If we have any questions, then they can be noted, and then the officers will come back to us with the answers to those questions. I think it'll make the meetings go a bit smarter. So Ben, your agenda item 10 is the first of those reports. Is there anything you wish to say on this?
Very briefly, simply, it is as expected, as was reported in first and second quarter, has gone through to Cabinet, and there are no surprises in there in terms of the consistent advice I've given. I don't think I need to say anything else.
Okay. The only thing I would want to comment on is for members to note the bold paragraphs in that report, because Ben has clearly articulated in part 1 of the agenda the efforts he's making to manage the risks and to keep the financial positions and pressures on his radar very clearly. And I think those bold paragraphs the committee members must note, because obviously there's some significant messages in there that we need to keep a watch on. I wouldn't want to say any more than that. If there are any questions that want to be taken away, then Jeremy can make a note.
Could I just make, just to obviously reiterate that in regard to that paragraph F on page 394, just really it would have been maybe, I mean, I think that needs to be considered at the beginning of the report as a bold statement, right at the beginning on the introduction, because then you can read the rest of the report with that backdrop there, really. It's just a note, Ben, just for, if that was at the beginning, then you can read the rest with that backdrop, really, rather than in the middle of the document. But it's a very clear statement and very clear message. Thank you.
Okay. Move on from that one. The next agenda item is the audit tracker. And we've had a supplementary paper that's been circulated before the meeting, because the reports that are still working in progress around recommendations wasn't attached to the first circulation of the papers. So we've had apologies for that, and it's there for again for information. I'm pleased to see that this is maintaining its live status, because I know our colleagues from Audit Wales are more than pleased that we are monitoring progress against those Audit Wales recommendations that are being made. And I think the details in the back appendices, although it's in small font, I think it's demonstrating that work is underway to take forward those recommendations that are being made. And it gives confidence to the Governance and Audit Committee also that work is being undertaken in the same way as recommendations are actioned for internal audit. We're also seeing recommendations being actioned for external audit. So again, unless there are any questions that need to be taken away, we can move on to the Governance and Audit Committee Action Tracker. Again, this is for information and it keeps us up to speed with what information is due to come to us or what we've asked for a follow-up review on. And I think everything's in hand from what I can see. So I've got no comments unless anybody's got a comment to make. And similarly, with agenda item 13, this is our forward-looking work plan. And we've got planned up to June 25, and I'm sure Jeremy will be drafting one for us for take us further into the 25-26 period of time. And we've also got the scrutiny work programme attached as well. So we're excited of the work that's going on in scrutiny. Yes.
Chair, just to remind members that I'm doing a session on Monday afternoon on the panel performance assessment between 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So look forward to seeing you all there, I hope.
Yeah, and I've looked at the procedural document you've done. It looks really comprehensive. So I'm looking forward to that training assessment. So if as many members can attend that as possible, that would be really helpful. Okay, and that leads us on to agenda item 14. This is a report for exclusion to the public. So I need for Jeremy to stop the recording and make his exclusions. I need a hands up though if you support exclusions to the public. Yeah. Hands up on, yeah. Thank you so much. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to make sure everything